This is the final project of Kian, Kermani, and Ivonne Fedora for IAT355 in fall 2020. In this project, we looked at international tourism and the number of tourist arrival in every country in the world, and if there is a relation between the number of tourists arriving in a country and their human development index. So basically in this project we're trying to find out how is the international arrival trend in the world, how is the human development index in the world, and if there's a relation between the two. Human development index can be an indication of how a country is developed and what are the standards of living in that country, which is one of the main factors people choose to travel to a country. The target audience for this project could be government agencies and businesses who work with tourism and would like to know um, what their country values are and where they stand in an international scene. Therefore, the problem and domain that we are trying to solve here is how does the international tourist arrival varies through the years 1995 to 2018? How does the human development index varies in these years? And what is the relation between countries' human development index and international tourist arrival, and if there is a pattern between them? The dataset we used were achieved from World Bank and United Nations official numbers. They measure the years 1995 to 2018, and they include most countries, and they are very accurate data. When it comes to visualization, we chose to go with word map, multi-line graphs, and scatter plot. We chose this because they were interactive, they are aesthetically pleasing, and they can serve a very good purpose for our project. When it comes to the word map, we can basically see a country and a region all at a glance. You could choose a slider to choose the years, and you would be able to identify a trend very quickly. When it comes to multi-line graphs, they're the best way to visualize a large number of entries, and you would be able to compare a lot of countries really quickly and identify if there's an odd entry or if there's a trend between them. When it comes to the scatter plot, it's the best way to identify and compare two data sets and be able to make a conclusion and drive to a conclusion. Looking at our first visualization, we use the word map and a slider to choose the year that we would like to see the values for. And in each word map, you would be able to see how the country stands based on the color on the spectrum. So, for example, if I continue changing the years, you would see the various countries in various regions in the world changing in their international tourist arrival numbers and the number of human development index given to them. The map is interactive, so if you hover over a country, you would be able to see the number of international tourist arrival, and you would be able to quickly compare it to the human development index and go back and forth in the years to see how it changes. So looking at Russia, as it's a very big country, we can see that the international tourist arrival was very low and their human development index was in the middle. And as the years went by, their number of tourists is increasing and their human development index is increasing. So as their human development index falls into green in 2018, the number of tourists arriving is much more than where we started from, indicating a rise and a trend in their numbers. Going down further, we have developed a multi-line graph to compare all the countries' tourist arrival next to each other. This multi-line graph helps us identify odd instances. For example, we would be able to see that France always had a very high number of international tourist arrival, and it currently is at a rise. We can see countries like United States having a much less increase in the number of international tourist arrival, indicating a change in policy or the trend. There are some instances, for example, Turkey, that since 2010 it had a negative slope when it comes to the number of international tourists arriving. But overall, looking at all the countries, especially those that doesn't have many international tourist arrival, we can see an upward trend. Most countries are going toward more international tourists arriving since the year 2000. With the very same concept, we created another multi-line graph, this time indicating the Human Development Index number. We can see that in most cases there is a very upward trend, very slow, but there's an upward trend. And we can definitely identify the odd instances, for example, Cyprus, where the Human Development Index was on the rise till the year 2015, but it's going back down. Could be because of the clashes that's happening there. There are countries that had a very low human index to begin with, and haven't had a major increase. And then there are countries that had really big increases. So we can quickly identify them, like Hong Kong, for example. Started with a very low human development index in the year 2000, and in 2005 it had a very sharp increase. This is a great way to identify where do we have the most human development index and if it's on the rise or not, and compare the countries next to each other. And finally, we get to our scatter plot graph. This is a graph that indicates the country's human development index versus their number of tourist arrival. So the circles representing each country at a certain year would indicate that the more the human development index of a country is, the more their international tourist arrival tends to be. We can definitely see that the area where it's more than half in the human development index tends to have more tourist arrival, and then there are countries here where they have magnificent number of international tourists. You can't really see a country having a low human development index and have a really high number of tourist arrival. Of course, there are other factors that affect international tourist arrival, but human development index, according to this visualization, plays a major role in the number of tourists arriving as a country. In our feasibility pilot, we found out that while we were very successful in certain visualization, couple of improvement could have been done to some of our visualization. For example, when it comes to the scatter plot, it could have been interactive. It's something that we could use for the future. So in conclusion, we have found out that the aim of this study and what we were trying to find out has turned out to be true. The number of international tourists visiting a country is on the rise in most cases, and the number of human development index of countries indicating their development and human rights is on the rise too. And the two factors definitely affect each other. We have seen it in our graphs that there are certain countries like Afghanistan that had unique events such as war that takes them off this chart, but in most cases, out of the 200 countries that we observed today, more than 200 countries that we observed today, a lot of them have an upward trend, and their human development index is tied to the number of international tourists that visits them. These numbers can be very useful for businesses and governments to find out where they can improve their policies to have more international tourists and therefore more income. Thank you so much for watching our video today, and I hope you enjoyed.